Hey everybody, my name is PC Muñoz, and I'm a musician, recording artist, producer, and writer based in San Francisco. Though I am originally from the Santa Clara Valley, I am an orchard son from San Jose, and I always love going back. I'm sorry that we can't be together in the Santa Clara University's beautiful auditorium for this time together, but hopefully you'll enjoy this in the virtual energy exchange that we do. I want to give a shout out to Professor Ray Ferruta for inviting me back. It's always great to work with Ray in any capacity, and always great to encounter the Santa Clara University students. So I hope that I hear from you after you watch this. My website is pcmunoz.com. That's pcmunoz.com. I'd love to hear any thoughts you have or any comments at all, really. So today I'm going to be playing some music and talking a little bit about my work and my career, and some of the primarily I'm going to be using three elements. Two of the elements are off camera, so I thought I'd tell you what they are so you understand what you're hearing. Most likely you're familiar with the two things off camera you're familiar with. This thing, which I'll explain in a little bit, you might not be familiar with. So at my right foot I have a small kick drum, and then you'll be hearing that. And on my left foot, I have what's called a lowboy. For those of you who know the different parts of a drum set, a hi-hat is two cymbals that can be clamped together via a pedal. And a lowboy is basically, it's the original version of the hi-hat. It's a small hi-hat that was used in early jazz drum sets. It was called a sock cymbal there, then also was called a lowboy. And it's basically a tiny hi-hat. And over the years, it grew taller, like a lot of things do. And in most conventional drum sets now, it's much higher, but it originally sat right around foot high or ankle high. And I still like using the lowboy a lot. It's convenient for the type of work that I do. So those are the two elements that are off camera that you'll be hearing. And they will be there, but you won't be seeing them. And then the third element, which you will see, is this curious looking thing called the slapstick. So the slapstick is a pretty new instrument. So it was invented just in the last 5 or 6 years by a guy named Andy Graham, who's also a Bay Area guy, based in like northern Marin County, like in Novato area, I believe. So Andy is a percussionist and inventor, and he invented this thing, which I haven't heard him use this exact terminology, but I use it a lot. I call this an electric drum on a stick. So it uses or I apply the facility of a drummer and percussionist onto the stick. Except for I can do things like that. I can bend notes. And I can generate notes. There's tonal quality to it, things that generally aren't really part of a drummer's vocabulary. So it's really opened up my world in terms of music making and performance, such that I don't know if I'll ever perform without it again. So I'm grateful to Andy Graham for inventing this thing. I had for years thought about what if there was a drum that you held the way most people hold a guitar or a bass. But I didn't have the inventor's mind to come up with it and create it. So he did, and when I first saw it, I fell in love with it. And immediately started using it and applying it to my work. So those are the three instruments you'll be hearing a lot of: the slapstick and the kick drum, and the mini kick drum and the lowboy. So I'm going to play just a little bit, just to give you an example of how these three things sound together. I've been kind of hinting at it, but here's another one. So again, that's the slapstick and the kick drum and the lowboy. And as you can hear, like when I explain it, so I use it as a lead instrument. But how I characterize it for people is I'd say, think of it almost like a rapper. A rapper's there's a set beat underneath them, but there's all these complex rhythms coming out of their mouths when they rap. So this is almost like a rapper in my hands, I'm making the rhythms happen. It's also sort of functions as a regular sort of rhythm instrument or a bass-like instrument. So that's all. Sorry for the cars that you hear going by. Like I said, I live on a city street in San Francisco, so you might hear some stuff. So again, the interesting thing about this is that it feels like a lead instrument, but it's also a rhythm instrument. But it really opens up for me a lot of possibilities as a drummer and percussionist. And one of the biggest things it does is it gives me the opportunity, the long dreamt of opportunity, to use effects pedals the way guitarists and bassists do. I've always been really jealous of guitarists and bassists and synthesizer players who get to play with all these freaky sounds, because I love really interesting sounds, and I'm very often looking for sounds that no one's made before. So I put a high priority on originality. And so the ability to take what this is already pretty interesting and unique and then flip it by adding some effects. So I'm going to play you different examples of effects that I use on this stick, and ways that I create grooves just with pure rhythm, there's no actual bass line and there's no chord changes, but you can hear a groove emerge. Here's the sound. That's one sound. One of the things I really like about this too is if I detune this thing completely, because right now you can hear the sound. You can hear the tension coming off when I smack it, right? But when I detune it completely, it becomes this like little. Becomes this like this little weird drum that I'm just hitting, finger drum. So that's when you detune it all the way. So I'll move on to a different effect as well. And the reason why I'm taking you through this is because as a solo performer, you always have to, or at least I try to, find new flavors every time I do something. And, I think contemporary listeners are fairly sophisticated. They're used to hearing music at their will anytime, calling up, Amazon Music or Spotify or whatever streaming service they use, Apple Music, Google Play, whatever it is. They're used to music on command at basically anything they want and any time. And they're used to limitless sounds which a lot of contemporary music creators are very accustomed to as well, because growing up with being able to record, excuse me, tons of tracks, and using Ableton Live and using all kinds of sounds, it's very important to continue to look for ways that you can make yourself stand out and make yourself a unique performer and someone who has something singular to offer. So that's one of the things that I really like about the instrument, is that it helps me as a drummer. I don't have I don't use a typical drum set. I've discarded them years ago, started building my own. And this just adds to that whole thing of having a different sort of sound that that becomes singular. So here's another effect. Yeah, I like this one a lot. This effect has like this, you hear that? Wow. I love that. It has that deeper sound that kind of stays for a while. So let's hear how that sounds a little bit. That's another effect that I really like to use on the slapstick. And to get back to what I feel I've been drawn to this instrument since the first time I saw it. And I think one of the main reasons I'm drawn to it is I've always liked and felt very connected to the traditional one-string instruments. So they have roots in Africa and made it all over the world via different ships and things. So there's the I think it's called the diddley bow, which eventually ended up in kind of early American music. And then there's the berimbau, which is a one-string instrument that ended up in the Brazil area, and that's used a lot in traditional Brazilian music or different forms of it. And then there's a one-string instrument in Vietnam, which is called the dan bao, and there's a really good player of that instrument here in the Bay Area named Van Eng Vo, who you should check out if you get a chance to. And then excuse me. And then there's an instrument in Micronesia called the Balimbau Tudzin. And my dad happens to be a native of that area, and the Balimbau Tudzin is very similar to the berimbau in that it's a one-string instrument, and it's percussive, but also has this tonal quality. And I believe that's what drew me to this instrument, is it feels sort of like those instruments. It feels grounded in ancient tradition, but also looking towards the future, obviously, because of the effects and the plug. So it feels like both like an honoring of all the great traditions that have had this kind of percussive instrument in the tradition, and then a forward-looking with all the different ways you can tweak it and freak it. So again, that's what I feel is my, like, at depth, my pull towards this thing. And I think the reason why it's meant so much to me, even though it's a fairly new thing, and it's become such an important part of the arsenal that I use. So I'll play you another little bit with a different effect. Yeah, this is a freaky one. So for this one, I think I'm gonna play a little bit of this. I have a track to play to. I'm not gonna play the whole thing, but I'll give you an example of how it sounds with the track. This track is called Pathological. that's a little bit of this tune called Pathological, which I recorded a little bit ago, hoping to, I thought I was going to put some words in there, but I ended up really liking how the slapstick sounds over it as a kind of rhythmic lead instrument. So in general, when I start to create with slapstick, I'm often trying to see how it can push a groove along in the way that a bass or a guitar would. And I think I try to stay away from sounding too bassy, other than because I just think if it's too bassy, I might as well be playing bass while I'm playing drums. So I want to make sure that it's different enough from a bass and from a guitar and from a keyboard that it just sounds like some other thing and catches your ear. Because I think at this point, like I was mentioning earlier, when people make music, you really have to have something that catches people's ears and eyes, because visuals are such an important part of performing now. And I'm finding this thing really hits the spot. So here's another effect that I like this one quite a bit. I love that effect. Can you tell? I love that effect. So as I'm exploring the limits of the slapstick, I keep trying different things with it and seeing what it does to my fingers as a percussionist, as a drummer, and as a composer, what kinds of things I can come up with. The interesting thing is because it sort of lives in a space between drums and other and kind of instruments like that play chords like a guitar or piano or something, that it has it lives in a strange place tonally, but it makes for a really cool and unique sound. So one of the main things that I do in my career is I love to collaborate with people, and I especially love to collaborate in a one-on-one situation. So I love doing duos with basically any kind of musician, because I love the give and take of between the exchange between musicians at a high level, where interesting ideas are being exchanged and different things are being expressed and responded to. I love playing and responding to what another musician is doing, and that's what I miss the most while doing these virtual performances. I'm not responding to anyone. I can't respond to you or see your faces right now because I'm pre-recording this, so I don't know how you respond to this. I don't know if you're amused, if you're bored, if you're loving it. I don't know any of that, but it's interesting to do this virtually, and I think we've all talked about that when we're in the virtual world, what we miss. And I think for performers, what we miss is that looking out and seeing and feeling that energy of a response to what we're putting out. And for me, going back to the collaboration thing, that's the main thing. Is I love to sit with someone and have this creation come about because of our two persons have created this thing, a piece of music, a piece of sound that comes from just being in someone's proximity and listening and responding. And that's been a big part, as I mentioned, of my career. So as I move into, or in this realm right now, when I'm forced to only perform solo, so it's interesting I need to respond to myself, and I need to collaborate with myself, basically. And I think that's another reason why I love working with this thing, is that while I can keep the beats going down here with my feet, excuse me while I fix the low boy, I can respond to it with a slapstick, and that kind of has an element of collaboration, I suppose. It's a little compartmentalizing, but right now, while I'm really missing working with other musicians, the best I can do right now is to try on this different instrument and use it to try new things, in a way that seeks some kind of collaboration, because obviously if I'm by myself it isn't a true one, but I can explore and try and find new ways to respond to what my initial idea, or how I'm coming up with things. So that part's exciting as well. Like I said, if you go to my website, which is pcmunoz.com, or my Bandcamp page, which is pcmunoz, pcmunoz.bandcamp.com, you'll see lots and lots of collaborations with different people, classical musicians, jazz musicians, R&B and funk musicians, hip-hop musicians. So it's rock musicians. I love to work with people in that way. And like I said, it's the biggest thing I miss, and I try to approximate it when I sit down here and go, what can I respond to? I can respond to this beat, or I can respond to a title or something like that. I think I have one of, yeah. So there's this effect I also want to show you. This one is interesting because it has, that sounds like the beginning of Michael Jackson's Beat It. So it's has this kind of sound. So I'm going to play another song for you called Archery. So Archery is a piece from an album of mine called Grab Bag. So Grab Bag is an album I made in 2008. And on the album version, there's a special guest musician named Joan Jean Renaud, who was a composer and cellist, and she was in the world famous Kronos Quartet for a long time, and she went solo. And she went solo in around 1999, and I got involved with her career around 2006, and we've been working together ever since. And she's a wonderful person, great musician. And for that particular piece, or this particular piece, Archery, I had her respond to this groove, and there were some words on it as well. On this version, I won't have any words, but you'll hear me kind of listening to the groove and doing things with the slapstick over it. And if you go listen to the recorded version, which I think you can hear on the on all streaming services and also on my Bandcamp page, you'll hear the cello doing similar things. So here's Archery. So again, that's a piece called Archery, and that's from my record called Grab Bag, which again is from the year 2008. And you can hear the original version on my website or on my Bandcamp page, or it's also on all kinds of streaming services. So again, primarily the tools I've been using today have been the kick drum, the little boy, and the slapstick. But you've also been hearing tracks that I made that I've been playing from an iPad here. In addition to the percussion instruments that I use, I also use a whole lot of apps to create music. So especially, again, when I was talking about earlier, when you want to perform and you want to make sure that you're offering different flavors, because people are very accustomed to hearing different flavors these days. So I always make sure I have lots of different toys packed into my iPad, so that I can make music that in the moment that is compelling to people. So here's one thing, this app. Ray's been with me while I've used this tool before. So this is called a Filtertron. It's made by the company Moog, very famous for some of the first synthesizers. And it's very easy to control, and you can create these sort of freaky sounds and really go lots of places with them. I highly recommend using these types of apps for both fun, just for like fun sonic experimentation, and also for actual music creation. I think with all the tools at our disposal these days, it's foolish not to use them, because they're all there. Very often they're free. The Filtertron is not free, but a lot of different music making tools are. And I believe if you're planning on being a professional musician, or if you're just someone who likes to create as a way to blow off steam, whatever it is, it's all valid ways of music making, and I think it's worth your while to examine all the different tools. You know, something to think about at the very least. So to close things out, I wanted to do something that's more contemplative. So as I mentioned, one of the things that I like to do is use apps. So one of the apps that I like to use a lot is an app an app called Bloom, which is created by the very well-known producer named Brian Eno. So Brian Eno worked with David Bowie early on, and he's worked with U2 and the Talking Heads and many different artists, seminal rock and pop artists, and he's an interesting person, and he created this app which he calls a generative composition app. It's called Bloom, B-L-O-O-M, and I use it a lot as a tool for sort of bringing forth an ambient space for contemplation or for meditation, just a very peaceful kind of vibe. And what it does is it gives you this sort of drone, and then you touch it and it gives off this high-pitched sort of chime, and then it repeats it in a cycle. And all you need to do is touch it, and it'll start creating this composition that feels like something. And when I create on the Bloom, I usually give it a title. So for this one, I'm giving this piece the title of "Bruh, you need to get going, bruh, so you won't be sorry later, bruh." So that's the name of the piece, and this is what that piece sounds like. So that was Bruh, You Need to Get Going, Bruh, So You Won't Be Sorry Later, Bruh. Generated from the Brian Eno's Bloom app. Again, another highly recommended app to use for music creation, both professional and for just casual, or also for purely functional reasons if you want to use it to meditate or contemplate a certain thing. So I hope you have enjoyed the journey we've been on today, and I hope that it inspired you in some way. And I hope that if you play a certain instrument and you'd like to branch out, that you're think about, find what this is for your instrument. Like, what's the side thing? What's the different thing that you can try to apply your skills and grow them in a different way? Because I think that as artists, it's very important to continue growing, continue adding to your skill set and adding to what you offer as an artist, because there's so much out there right now, especially in the realm of music. So again, thank you for listening, and thank you, Ray, for having me, and I hope you found something valuable. And again, I'd love to hear from you. So my website is pcmunoz.com, pcmunoz.com. My email address is pc@pcmunoz.com, and I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear what you're up to. So, excuse me. So again, just many thanks, and I hope to hear from you, and take care.